B'Shem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach. Welcome everyone to our weekly Parsha Shiur with the Perush of the Zera Shimshon, with the commentary of the Zera Shimshon. May the zechut of this Shiur be for the refuah shelema of kol chole am Yisrael, especially those that are injured or sick. May Hashem give them a refuah shelema, and it should also be leidun nishmat. And also, obviously, Leilun Nishmat the Zera Shimshon himself, Harav Shimshon Chaim ben Nachman Michael. May his zechut be a melitz yosher for all of Am Yisrael. We are going to do Derush Zayin, the seventh ot of the Zera Shimshon on the Parsha. And here we go. The Pasuk says, Kaved lev Paro. In Perek Zayin, 7th chapter of Shemot, Pasuk Yud Daled, Pasuk 14, says that Paro's heart is hard. Paro's heart is hard. And he refuses to send the people. He refuses to send Bnei Israel out of Egypt. And it also says in Perek Yud, chapter 10, Pasuk Aleph, the first Pasuk, it says the same thing. Ki ani hichbaditi et libo. I have hardened his heart. Hashem says, I have hardened Paro's heart. Kashe, and this is difficult. Let's understand why this is difficult in a few senses. Lama tala katuv hakeshi lev shel Paro b'lishon kaved. Why is it that the hardness of Paro's heart has been described as Kaved. Kaved generally in Hebrew means what? Heavy. It means heavy. Right? As we see in the Parsha later on also, when the Torah wants to say that Hashem hardened Paro's heart, it says, Vehechzakti et lev Paro. Chazak means strong, to stiffen. I stiffened Paro's heart. But in the beginning it says Kaved. Right? So why the use of an unnatural terminology to say that Paro was being stiff-necked or being, stubborn? Yeah, for lack of a better word. Or it is the better word. So this is kasher. This is difficult to understand. Why use the word kaved? Velama bechol pa'am iskir milat lev. And also we have to understand is why are we mentioning the heart of Paro each time? Lev Paro or Kaved Lev Paro. What's with the heart? Why does it have to really dafka say that Paro's heart was hardened? Why did Hashem presumably take away Paro's free will towards the end of the Makot? And he says, Yesh kan pitchom pe laminim lomar lo haya mimenu she'aseh teshuvah. It is literally giving a chance to those that like to find problems with the Torah to say, oh look, God took Paro's decision-making away. He had no free will. He was incapable of doing teshuvah. So what do you expect? Hashem literally punished him for wanting to punish him. Or Hashem literally punished him when he had no way out of the punishment. That's not fair. That's God. When people want to find problems, they'll find problems. So he's saying this makes it even worse. How could we say that Hashem took away Paro's free will?
His heart got hardened after the seventh time, or was at what stage does heart get?
After the sixth.
The sixth one?
Yeah. 7 and 8 and 9. No.
Fifth?
After the 7th. 8, 9, and 10 already were when it says Hashem hardened his heart. Right? But before that, it says he hardened his own heart. But we have hardening heart everywhere. So the question is, what's with the hardening of the heart? Why even mention the heart? What does the heart have to do with the hardening? Why is him being stiff-necked have to do with his heart? We're going to go through that a little.
Sorry, one question.
one of those first 7 times that says he hardened his own heart one time, it uses it like a, how do you say it? It says his heart got hardened. It doesn't say he hardened.
Right, or his heart got hardened.
That could be God's act.
Well, if it was God's act, it would say just like the rest of them, and Hashem hardened his heart, or Hashem made his heart stiff. It doesn't say that. So it's actually referring to him. And we'll see how that makes sense here. Beyesh lomar. So now an intro into how we could answer this question. This is going to go a little bit into like halachic works, and then we're going to come back out of halacha and we're going to discuss the philosophy behind hardening Paro's heart. It's actually extremely interesting. He says like this. For those of you that just came right now, small little recap is that we're discussing why we're in the Torah, during the Makot, during the plagues, the Torah says that, uses the word kaved, when it says, kaved lev paro, Paro's heart had become hardened, or v'chen, and also it says, ki ani ichbadti et libo, I have hardened Paro's heart. First of all, the word kaved is not the right word to use. As we see later on in the Parsha, it says, v'chizakti et lev paro. V'chizakti means I made a Paro's heart stronger or stiff. It's a better word used. So why are we using kaved once and then later on, or twice, and later on we're using chazak. And then he says, why even mention Paro's heart? What does it have to do with Paro's heart? Right? And the other thing is, why is Hashem taking away the bechira? Why is Hashem taking away Paro's free will? It's as if to say, people are going to complain later on and say, hey, Hashem punished Paro, but he shouldn't have punished Paro because he took away his free will, which is a question that we've asked many, many times. We have so many different answers to. Okay. So he says, Shakadosh Baruch Hu, madad lo midah keneged midah. Hashem really, as we discussed so many other classes that we've had, Hashem works midah keneged midah, measure for measure. So Hashem was paying Paro back measure for measure, midah keneged midah. How so? And this is a huge chidush. It's a very novel idea that the Zera Shimshon uses, because many other authorities discuss the fact that God taking away Paro's free will and how it was not actually a problem at that time for different reasons. One of which is that really Hashem hardening Paro's heart was in order to give him free will. It was the opposite. How so? Because there was so much pressure with the makot, with the plagues. There was so much pressure on Paro to actually let the Jews go that he wasn't really using his free will anymore. Because Egypt was going to be no more. So he had no choice really. He had no will. He was going to let the Jews go because of all the pressure. So Hashem hardened his heart to give him free choice, balancing it for him. Meaning he making him a little bit more stubborn so that he doesn't bend because of the plagues. He'll actually make his own decision. That's one of the answers. Another answer is that we could say is that not if when we're saying that God took away Paro's free will, it would only be a philosophical problem if it wasn't in a situation that it was used as a punishment. Which means, when Hashem hardened Paro's heart, taking away his free will, that was his punishment. That was his punishment. Hashem basically said, look, I've given you a lot of time to use your free will for the good. You decided not to. Therefore, your punishment will be you yourself, against yourself. Your punishment will be that I'm taking away your bechira, I'm going to take away your free will, so that now you can't do teshuvah. We've seen this in many works, that it says that Reshaim, those that are wicked, and they want to continue in their wickedness, so to speak, Hashem doesn't help them do teshuvah. Hashem makes it kind of difficult for them to do teshuvah, because I tried to help you 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and you would not nudge, now you know what? I'm just going to leave you to yourself. You're going to be your own worst enemy. That's what happened with Paro. These are some of the explanations using free will. Here, the Zera Shimshon gives a very big chidush. He says Paro's free will was not taken away, period, at all. Which to me was a chidush. It wasn't taken away. No, don't even talk about free will, because Paro had 100% of his free will to the end. Even when Hashem says he hardened his heart, at that point, maybe you could say, you could use the shot that I just gave you right now, but at least from the beginning until the 6th, no, it was nothing to do with his free will. And he explains like this. Now we're going to go to the halachic part of it. So listen. Shekatav Peri Chadash v'zeh leshono. This is the words of the Pri Chadash. The Pri Chadash is a halachic work on Yorei De'ah, on the Shulchan Aruch. He says, he wrote, the Peri Chadash writes, that it is written in the Sefer Beit Chadash, which is the Bach. We call it the Bach. It's written in the Bach. Kibalti shema'aseh haya shenimtza etzem betoch halev. It says, I have heard, or I received, that what? That there was an incident once where there was a bone found in a heart. Okay, in the Pri Chadash is discussing how does an animal become a terefa, right? You have animals, and when you shecht an animal, then you have to check the insides to see if the animal is healthy. And then there are things that in halacha are discussed as to how do you decide this animal is healthy for you to be able to eat it. If there are defects found inside, especially the main arteries of the animal, that would say that the animal would not have survived an entire year, that animal is a terefa, you can't eat it anymore. Meaning, if the outcome is that you found something in the animal where if the animal was still living and you hadn't shechted it, would not have survived the year, then it's a terefa. It was a sick animal, it was on its way to die, you can't eat it anymore. So now, he says that he found that there was an incident where they shechted an animal, it was actually a deer, and they found a bone in the deer's heart. And the chachamim of the generation made it kosher, and they said it's fine, you could still eat the animal. Chidush, right? Veichshir chachmei hador, and the chachamim of that generation made this animal kosher, and they said it's fine. Why? Lefi shekach nimtza belev hatzvi, because this is actually something you do find in the heart of deers. It's something that could happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that the deer is sick or was a terefa. You could find such things. Imagine a bone in the heart. Okay? Shemitkasheh hadam v'naseh etzem. How does this bone, where's this bone from? It's not that something cracked in the body of the animal went to the heart. No, it grew in the heart, and it actually is not a bone. It's blood that becomes hardened, and it becomes like bone inside the heart. It's a bone-like material that forms inside the heart of this animal that becomes bone, but it's really blood, a form of blood clots, a rock-hard blood clot, bar minan. I researched this in Google. It's very interesting. Very interesting stuff. These are the Mefarshim on the Shulchan Aruch from hundreds of years ago, and you will be amazed as to what you find in the internet about it now. The exact animals that they say you find these things in are in, as I researched, I found. It's nuts! You'll see. I find these things so amusing, so unbelievable, right? He says, "Ve'efshar sheyeh nimtza kach lif'amim bebehema." And he says that sometimes you could actually find these in domesticated animals as well. So he said this was found in a deer, which is not a domesticated animal. Deers are wild animals, even though they're kosher. But he says these could be found in domesticated animals as well, like sheep, cows. And Atkan, he says, this until here was the quote of the Bach. This was the Peri Chadash writing what the Bach wrote. And he says, but the truth is, im kibalato kabbalah, if this was something that you actually heard, he says, en lilmod mimenu lish'ar. He says, you can't say that it could be found in other animals as well. You heard about the deer, then you should just quote and say, this is about the deer only. Don't say you could find it in other animals, domesticated animals either. It couldn't be. Because if that's what you heard, then that's the only thing that could be true. There's a davka betzivi, because it's only the tzivi. Aval matzati besefer Zera Shimshon shekatav v'zeh leshono. It says, however, I found in the sefer called Zera Shimshon, and this is what he says. V'chol minei haba'alei chayim en lahem etzem belibotam. All species of animals have no bone in their hearts. Milevad, except min hasus uv min echad shel hashvarim. It says there's a type of a horse and a type from the species of the ox, which I found to be, when I was researching it, it said that it is found also in
Goats, sheep.
No, buffaloes. That's why he says min hashvarim. He says it is found in large oxen, in the family of large oxen, which is, buffaloes. This bone is found. He says because they have this bone, because their bodies are so big, I guess the heart is so big, it needs support. So the heart itself has a bone that holds it inside the animal, so to speak, because it is so large. That's why they have it. So there's two different kinds here. As their heart needs support, because it needs strength to hold it up. Accordingly, an animal which you find a bone in its heart, you cannot make this animal mutar to be eaten. You find the bone inside an animal's, regular animal's heart, it's a terafa. Until you know for a fact that it's from the species that it's natural to have this bone in their heart. If it's not from those species, this bone makes the animal a terafa. Did I do a good job explaining that? Yeah, I didn't do it. So, could get a little for me as well sometimes. Sometimes it gets a little, it's amazing. I like to do these things because I feel the more Jewish young people know complicated halakha in the Torah is, I feel it's the better. Because this way we can understand and appreciate how much it takes to ordain halakha, to actually pass judgment on halachic matters. It's not just like, you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. Why did the rabbis make this? The rabbis, I love it when I hear that. Rabbis sat down in a circle and they made a decision. You know what? Make this asur and make that mutar. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Have an easy vacation. We'll see you next time. That's not how these things ever went down. It's very difficult. There's so much depth. The Chachamim knew so much, as you can see. They knew the innards of animals like Google. They had their own Googles in their minds, right? So he says, Ad kan leshono, and until here, this was the quote of the Pri Chadash. This was the halachic thing of the Pri Chadash. So now Zera Shimshon comes back. It's so nice, so good as always. Val pi ze yesh lomar, and according to this, we could say, shemeikara nitkasha damo al Yisrael kol kach bekas. In the beginning, when it says that Paro's heart had become heavy, kaved, right? It says in the beginning, Paro's heart had become hard with what? His blood was literally boiling from the stress and from the hatred and the sin'ah of the Jewish people because they wanted to leave. He was, as we say in Persian, dashte hers mikhord. His blood was literally boiling and he was just agitated. And he was like, right? He was going crazy. His blood was boiling in his heart. And that's when it says v'kaved. Kaved means it became heavy. It became like pooled in his heart. Shenitzrar adam belibo kelev hatzevi. That the blood pooled in his heart, it became hardened in his heart, just like the tzvi, just like the deer. That sometimes would happen, that a blood would clot in his heart, making it like literally a bone inside the heart. V'zeh perush pasuk, and this is the explanation of the part of the pasuk that he says, Paro's heart became hard, and he refuses to let the Jews go. This is what had happened. He had so much hatred, and he was so upset at the fact that the Jews wanted to leave Egypt, he was losing his mind. Because on one side, Moshe Rabbeinu was like literally destroying Egypt, and Paro had nothing to do. All he could do is, I'm not letting them go. And then boom, literally hell would come upon Mitzrayim, and there was nothing Paro can do about it. This was driving, he was literally having massive heart attack after heart attack. This is exactly actually what the Zera Shimshon is saying, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hardened his heart. He was gaining, he was getting blood clots in his heart. I'm telling you, this might sound funny, but you'll see how he proves it. It's beautiful. Listen. And this is what it says, Kaved lev Paro. Paro's heart is hard. It occurred because of the blood clot, or the pooled blood in his heart. Valken, and due to this, he wouldn't send the people because he was so agitated, he was so upset, he couldn't even think straight anymore, and he wouldn't let the Jews go. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that he was acting this way, that because of his rishut, because of his wickedness, his blood was boiling so much that it was becoming pooled in his heart. He strengthened his heart even more. That does not mean to say that Hashem took away, according to the Zera Shimshon, took away his free will. That's not what it means. It means that he hardened his heart. He made it hardened where he had a bone, literally, in his heart. The blood clot became solid. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hechezik, solidified the bone in Paro's heart.
This makes it seem like
It's a medical show?
giving him prolonging his life when he's probably supposed to die in the spot.
No, in fact, it's the opposite.
He's like the deer who parallel and
The deer that has the blood clot in its heart, right? If it's any other animal, it becomes a terefa. This way, Paro, excuse my term, calling him an animal, became a terefa, meaning his life had already been cut short, as if he's not even alive now. You understand? What does a terefa mean? When you shecht an animal and you find that it had a defect that it would not last a year, it means it was already dead. You just cut open a dead animal. It was sick enough that you can't eat it.
So he was going to die anyway.
Yes. You will see.
That's what blood clots do.
Lo aleinu, bar minat. You'll see where it's gonna get to it. You'll see. I mean, Zera Shimshon doesn't kid around. Right? Anybody else have any questions? Anything anyone wants to say that I could make fun of for the rest of the shiur? Or okay, here we go. Everyone's sitting there going, "Ain't gonna be next." Ve'hosif bo etzem. So Hashem puts this bone in his heart, so to speak. Lerov cheskat libo, to even strengthen his heart even more. Therefore, now we already have answered a couple of the questions that we have. Why did it call it kaved? It's not really Hashem taking away his free will. Now, V'zeh shamar hakatuv, כי בפעם הזאת אני שולח את כל מגפותיי אל ליבך. Again, you see in the pasuk, it says that this time, this was by the Makkah of Barad, the Makkah of hail. Moshe Rabbeinu says on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Paro, this time I will send my plague, all of my plagues into your heart. Et kol magefotai el libecha. Again, why are we talking about the heart again? You know, why doesn't Moshe Rabbeinu come to Paro and say on behalf of Hashem, this time because you didn't listen, I'm going to send the worst type of plague in your land, in your people. Why does it say, Et kol magefotai el libecha? I'm sending you all my plagues in your heart. Heart attack. That's literally, this is how I see it. This is what was happening. What does it mean? And Rashi says over there, Rashi says, what does it mean when Moshe Rabbeinu said, I will send all my plagues in your heart? Lamadnu shemakat bechorot shekula keneged kol hamakot. Rashi says over there that we learn from here that the makkah of bechorot, the firstborns that died, was equivalent, it was as tough as all of the makot put together. Why? Because it was death. Other makot were not instant death. Makat bechorot was instant death. So Rashi says, we see that makat bechorot was equivalent to all the makot. Says, and everybody asks, but this was makat barad. We were at the plague of hail. We're not at makat bechorot yet. We're not at the firstborn makkah yet, the plague of firstborns. Why is Rashi saying here, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Paro and said, I'm going to send you all the makot into your heart? Rashi says, we see from here, the makat bechorot is equivalent to all of the makot put together. We're not talking about makat bechorot. The next one is going to be barad. It's going to be hail. What just happened here? Be'od, shamakot lo hayu toch libo. And also, the makot were not in his heart. The makot were on the people. So why say in his heart? It says, according to what we just said, now it makes sense. When it says el libecha, in your heart, shehemid lo etzem toch libo. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu put a sharp bone in Paro's heart, uvaze nitraf. And because of this, Paro became taref. He became a terefa. He was going to die. He was a dead man walking, quite literally. B'da'at ha'peri chadash, k'da'at ha'peri chadash, according to the peri chadash. Ma shelo haya ken mitchila, and this is not what was happening in the beginning. Shelo haya rak nitzrar hadam. This wasn't just the pool of blood literally raging in his heart. Now it had hardened. And because it had hardened, Paro was being recognized as a taref. He was a dead man walking. Va'terafa af ba'adam eina chaya yutbet chodesh. And he says, and a terafa, even in a human being, is not going to live 12 months. It's literally a dead man walking. Kemoshe pasak peri chadash be'yoreh de'ah siman lamed aleph. This is what the peri chadash says in Yoreh De'ah, Siman 31, Seif Katan Zayin, if anyone wants to look at it. Look it up. And because Paro was in a danger of dying now, he's literally going to die. And because by the Makkah of Barad, by the plague of hail, it says, I will send you all my makot in your heart. This shows that barad actually is equivalent to all the makot, because barad is also bringing death, just like makat bechorot. So what Rashi is saying is, if the makkah of makat barad is equivalent to all of the makot because it just killed Paro, so to speak, how much more so makat bechorot is equivalent to equal to all the makot, because that one for sure killed all the firstborns. Vezeh, and this is the meaning, vayachbet libo hu va'avadav vayechazak lev Paro. Later on it says, and he made his heart stubborn. Paro made his heart stubborn. He, and then it says, he and his servants. And then it says, Paro's heart became strong. First it says kaved, and then it says vayechazak. Kaved means harden, chazak means strength, given strength. Shenitzrar damam bekirbam, all of his advisors were the same way. They were boiling with rage in their hearts at first. And then vayechazak, and then Hashem hardened the heart with the blood clot in their hearts, all of them. Vechen, and also you see when it says Ki ani ichpated libo vet lev avadav, it says Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants. They were all in the same boat, which means his servants were also terefot. Servants were also dead men walking. You'll see, I'm getting to the climax. Wait. Leman shiti ototai ele bekirbo. That's why it says, in order for me to place, so that I shall place these signs of mine within him, bekirbo, within him. Zera Shimshon says this means literally. Why does it say bekirbo? It should say bekirbam, within them. I want to show my signs, my miracles, my makot. I want to show my greatness within them. It says no, I want to give my makot bekirbo, within him. The Zera Shimshon says it's talking literally within his innards, in his body. He was basically putting all the stress of Egypt inside their bodies. That's how stress can kill a person. This is exactly what the Zera Shimshon is saying was happening physically to Paro's body and his servants. Ve'odati shaper, he says now it sounds even better now. Shachar shamar asher ithalalti b'Mitzrayim, because after Hashem says that I have amused myself with Egypt, asher ithalalti b'Mitzrayim, I've amused myself with Egypt. Dainu makot. This refers to the plagues. Hashem was saying, I've amused myself with the plagues on Egypt. Then it returns and he says, Ve'amar vet ototai asher samti bam. And all my signs that I put within them. And he says, this is referring to the fatal heart injury that Hashem gave Paro and his avadav, his servants. It says, therefore, listen to this now. Everybody following yet? Is that following yet? You just started following now? Great. Okay. Velachen, on this account, he says, Be'et hamakat bechorot amar Paro. At the time of the plague of the firstborns, what did Paro turn to Moshe Rabbeinu and Aharon HaKohen and say? What did he say? When he said, okay, you know what? Leave. Everybody just leave. Get out. Please leave. It was the last plague. Firstborns had all died. Paro turns to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, okay, please leave, take Bnei Israel with you. And then he adds something else. What does he say? He says, Uverachtem gam oti, and please bless me as well. What does he need a blessing right now? He's trying to get rid of the Jews. What blessing does he need? Okay, you got rid of the problem. Huh? He literally was asking for refuah shelema. He was dying. And he knew that even though he didn't die with makat bechorot, he was gonna die. And so were everybody else around him. So he was telling Moshe Rabbeinu, now that I've released you, uverachtem gamoti, please bless me also. Please. As a last truce. Beracha. He literally was asking for a beracha. From the greatest mevarech. Don't we wish we could get a bracha for Moshe Rabbeinu? It worked. Listen to this. So he says, he was telling them, Hitpalelu alai she'erafeh mimakat levavi. He was saying, please pray for him so that his heart defect will go away. Dum yad Avraham she'itpalel al Avimelech. This has happened before. Avraham Avinu was also asked by Avimelech to pray for Avimelech. When Avimelech took Sarai Menu, Avimelech asked Avraham before he left, he said, okay, Avraham, take your wife and go, but pray. And Avraham Avinu prayed for Avimelech to have a refuah shelema, and it worked. Paro was asking Moshe Rabbeinu at the same time. He wanted a blessing for refuah. You think it's done? We're not done yet. Ubazeh yuvan nami pasuk. Now this pasuk makes sense. What pasuk? Ki amru kulam metim. Because the pasuk says, for they said, Ki amaru kulam metim. They said, we're all dying. These were all the people around Paro. The Egyptians said, we're all dying. They weren't firstborns. What are you afraid of? Hashem said the firstborns. So far, all of the plagues have been exact and direct. Hashem said, take your animals inside, they won't die. Those that were inside all survived. Those that were outside all died. Hashem said, only so-and-so people will die, so-and-so people. Only this is going to happen, that happened. Hashem said, only firstborns died. So why were these people worried now? What, Hashem is getting a sloppy now, chas v'shalom? He's playing a guessing game? Firstborns will die, and I don't know. Whoever is unlucky will die too. That's not what happened. Hashem said firstborns, and He was going to kill the firstborns. So why is it that now the avadim of Paro came to Paro and said, they're all going to die now? They're all dead. Why? For how is it possible that they should all die? Moshe only said, only the firstborns are going to die. So why were they thinking they're going to die now? And if you explain, according to Chachamim, שהיו רואים שאם אין שם בכור גדול בבית מת. Says, even if you want to answer, because there's an answer that says, if one household didn't have a bechor, didn't have a firstborn, Chazal say that in that household, the oldest or the most honorable person would die. Right? So, some people were afraid of that. He says, but still, all of them were afraid that they're going to die because they're the oldest of the families. There was no one that was the youngest or the middle child in their family. Everybody was, you can't give that answer also. So why were they worried? So it says, Ela vadai, rather it must be, Shamitzrim hayu yodim shehem terefim. The Mitzrim knew that they are all terefim, they're all going to die. Right? Velo yuchlu lichyot, and they could not live any longer. Uchshera'u shemetu af me'otam sheinam bechorot, and when they saw that other people that were not Bechorot also actually did die, which were, let's say, the oldest of their family that had survived, that also died. They knew for a fact, they held, that you know what killed them? It's their heartache. Their hearts were hurting. They knew something was wrong. They knew they had already sected. Is that a word? They literally had heart attacks, and they felt, oh, that's it. You know, it was from the pains in their chest. They're all dying. They're next because they all had the pain, chest pain. Okay. That's why they all said they're about to all die. Now, ready for the cherry on top, everybody? Y'all ready for the cherry on top? Listen to this. This is years later, Yeshaya Novi. We're skipping forward from Moshe Rabbeinu in Mitzrayim all the way to Yeshaya Novi. He says, Yeshaya Novi says, Olevav Mitzrayim yimas bekirbo. He says, and the heart of the Egypt shall melt within it. That's what Yeshaya says. Kedel la'asoto terefa. And this was what? In order to make them terefa, the heart was literally melting. V'nagaf Hashem et Mitzrayim nagof verafo. Hashem gave a magefa to the Mitzrayim. What did He do? Verafo. And He healed them. The nigafam, for Hashem initially struck the Egyptians in their hearts. V'achar kach betzed Yisrael miMitzrayim. After the Jews left Mitzrayim, ripam. He healed them. That's why Yeshayahu says clearly, when the Jews left Egypt, Hashem healed the Egyptians. Healed from what? They weren't sick. There wasn't like a virus going around. They were either Bechor, they would die. They were not Bechor, they wouldn't die. There's nothing like that. So what was it for them to have refuah from? It was this. Because Paro asked Moshe Rabbeinu to bless them, they had a refuah from their terefas status. It wasn't because they were afraid that now they're going to, they were in the, they were supposed to be in quarantine and they were too close to someone, they were exposed to something. By the way, I saw a book, it just goes to show what kind of generation we're living in, right? I saw a comic book for kids that depicted all the makot, all of the plagues, and the story of Mitzrayim, right? And then I saw that the Egyptians, I can't make this up, the Egyptians were wearing masks, right? By the makkah of I guess, Dever or Shekhin or something, when they were getting sick, right? They were wearing masks. I'm like, what? How could this be? So I turned the book over and it was actually printed in 2020, right? So because it was printed in 2020, they wanted to make it realistic that the Egyptians were getting sick, so they were all wearing masks. That's what generation we live in order to communicate with children these days and tell them the Egyptians were getting sick, put masks on the pictures. And then the kids are like, that's what happened. Oh yeah, so that's what Shekhin was, or that's what Dever was. There was a virus going around. There was no such thing. No such thing. There was no virus. It wasn't catchy. Only people that were supposed to die would die. The people that were supposed to live would live. This was all orchestrated by Kadosh Baruch Hu to the T, mere perfection. This is what the Zera Shimshon just showed us tonight. That Paro's free will was not taken away. In fact, it was a physical ailment that Hashem put in their hearts. Just like a taref animal. They had a hardening inside their heart, like a blood clot, that was causing them to die. And they knew they were going to die. Until the last minute, they asked Moshe Rabbeinu for a blessing. Now don't ask me why Moshe Rabbeinu decided to give them the refuah shelema. Maybe because they did a shtickle, teshuvah. Even though afterwards they followed the Jews again. But we know a lot of people that do teshuvah like ourselves. We do teshuvah, we go back to it. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.